friends, welcome back to my channel. Wanted to come on here and tell you a little bit about the 16 books that I read in April. I can't even hold them all up. April was my best reading month in a long time, in terms of the number of books that I completed, but also in terms of the quality of the books that I picked up. I just read like some really amazing things. Some of the books that I read were gifts from the publisher. Some of the books that I read were to participate in challenges. I didn't do very well with my BookTube Prize reading assignment. I haven't finished any of those books so far, so I'm going to be doubling down in May. You'll see more of that. In choosing to prioritize some reading challenges, I also fell behind on some others, and it's fine. This month, my reading is heavily skewed towards fiction. I didn't finish many nonfiction reads. Yeah, none of the books that I read were nonfiction. So if you are here for nonfiction content, you may want to scroll through my channel and find other videos, like the video where I posted my discussion of the BookTube Prize reading from last month. You may want to watch that video instead. But here it's just novels. It's just novels, and I am fine with that. So let's get into talking a little bit about the books, because most of these are books that I discussed in reading vlogs earlier in the month. So if you want further discussion on any of the books that I mentioned here, you may want to watch some of those earlier videos as well. First book that I finished in April was James by Percival Everett. This is one of my favorite books that I have ever read, certainly one of my favorite books this year. This is marketed as a retelling of Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain, but it is so much more. It is about the story of the enslaved man who we meet in the Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, but this one gives him the dignity and the personhood that he deserves, because he is not just an enslaved man, he is also a man with a very complicated life. So in this book, Percival Everett asks the reader to imagine a life beyond enslavement for James, all the possibilities of a person who is of African descent and living in the South of the United States in the early to mid 1800s during the period of enslavement, but wanting to explore the path to freedom for himself and for his family. If you haven't already read this one, then I definitely recommend it. The next book that I finished was A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. And this is young adult fantasy. We're reading about a young woman who, in trying to take care of her family, she commits a violation against a creature from another world. And so she has to go and essentially exchange her life for the life that she has taken. And it is about how she enters this fairy world and what happens to her, the connections that she makes when she goes there. I selected this book for a reading challenge, and when I chose this title, I didn't know about all the controversies surrounding this author, but as a read of the text, I enjoyed it. I can't weigh in on the politics. I can't make a political statement about this author one way or another because I really haven't done any of the research, but just as a book, it was enjoyable, and I could see why there's a whole series. I can see why this book developed the following that it did, but it's not necessarily a book for me. This is not the genre that I enjoy most, so I don't know if I'll be reading any more in the series at this point. For the Runwright Reads book club, I read The Girl with the Hazel Eyes by Callie Browning, and this is historical fiction set in Barbados. And we're reading about two female writers at different points in Barbadian history, writing about what they see and experience in Barbados. So our first author is a woman who was living in Barbados around the time when Barbados was trying to get independence from colonial rule from England, and she writes about some of the corruption that she sees in the new fledgling government, and we explore what happens in her personal life as a result of this expose. Even though I'm from the Caribbean, there's a lot that I don't know about the histories of the individual countries, so I really enjoyed reading a book about this part of Bajan history. But despite how much I enjoy reading the book, the highlight for me in reading the books for the book club is the discussion that I have with the book club members. If you'd like to join the book club and participate in a future discussion, let me know in the comments down below that you want to participate, and I'll send you the link so you can join our Zoom. I finished The Matchmaker by Aisha Saeed, which was romantic suspense, and it's about a young woman who is of Pakistani descent living in Atlanta, Georgia, and she's taken the matchmaking business that her aunt built and adapted it for the 21st century, because now there's an app that uses a lot of the same principles to match people, but you can do that virtually now. There was a lot that I really enjoyed about this book. I like the romantic element, but I also liked how the author addressed some of the issues that I usually have with the tropes. and made it really fun to read, so like that. I also read Saltwater by Katie Hayes, and in this one we're reading about a family where the wife and mother died on a family vacation 30 years prior, and the family has continued going on that same vacation every year, and now 30 years later the daughter that she left behind is trying to figure out what happened to her mother, and there are all these things happening as we get an opportunity to kind of revisit the crime scene and revisit the crime. And I really enjoyed this as well. I loved how the author split the perspective, so we're reading from the previous timeline as well as two current timelines and seeing the mystery unfold in real time, but also a little bit in the past. The author did some really unique things in this book. She gave us lots of different examples of the same theme and gave us an opportunity to ask some questions and kind of fiddle with the answers for ourselves, and I really enjoyed that. So definitely want to recommend this to you as well. I also read The Care and Feeding of Ravenously Hungry Girls by Anissa Gray, and this one is about a family where the wife and husband have been incarcerated because of a fraud, and we're reading about what happens as their sisters try to pick up the pieces of their family, how their daughters are dealing with the loss of both parents at the same time, and also a little bit of their guilt. Or their feelings of guilt surrounding the situation, how they internalize those feelings, and just kind of how the family is imploding, but also how they're trying to catch each other up. Really enjoyed this one. It also motivated me to read another book by the same author, so stay tuned for more as this author comes up again. I finally finished Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. I had started it a couple of times and I had to restart it in April, but this time I finished it and I loved it. It is about a young black man in the mid-1900s and a little bit of his life as he explores the difference between living in the South and living in the North. Ralph Ellison in this one explores a bit of the experience of blackness in this time, how there are people who pretend that they can't see him, or even worse, people who see him as a part of a monolith, see him only as a stereotype, and are not able or willing to explore what it is to be him, and some of the challenges, but also some of the opportunities that that experience provides. I really enjoyed this one. I like how the author left the main character unnamed. I think it gives the reader an opportunity to really imprint upon this main character. I know this is a classic and really well loved and well admired, so if you've read this one, I'd love to hear your thoughts about it as well. Catalina is a novel by Carla Cornejo Villavicencio, and it is about an undocumented immigrant from Ecuador living in the United States of America. She is now a student at Harvard, and when we meet her, she's in this period in her summer break before her final year at Harvard. But while a lot of people are making plans for their future, because she's undocumented and she doesn't have papers to work, she is very uncertain about what her life after school will be because of her immigration status or lack thereof and the paths that have been closed for her. And in this book, we see some of the options that immigrants have to consider, not all favorable. What I really liked about this book, though, is that although this is a story about an undocumented immigrant, we see that Catalina is so much more. And I love the very complicated picture that the author paints of this main character and allows us to see her intellect and wit and almost rue the fact that her potential won't be realized because of the challenge of her immigration status. Next book that I read was Soil by Camille T. Dungy, subtitled A Black Mother's Garden. I forgot that I did read a nonfiction, so here we go. So Camille T. Dungy is a poet, and in this book, she chronicles her experience moving to Colorado with her family. They've moved into a predominantly white neighborhood, and one of the things she wants to do to really make this place her own is to establish a wildflower garden on her property. And so in this book, she talks a little bit about the challenges that accompany that experience. Some of the challenges are things that she saw happening in advance because she didn't know anything about gardening before she started ordering supplies. But it's also about things that she could not have foreseen, like the pandemic and how it changed her life and her schedule. What I really liked about this book was how the author talked about the challenge of finding space and claiming it for yourself, especially when you are a woman or a black woman or a wife or a mother or any combination of those. What are some of the challenges of finding and claiming that space and actually being able to enjoy it? So love that one as well. The next book that I read was The Husbands by Holly Gramazio, which is an alternate universe kind of story. We're reading about a woman who finds herself married even though she has no recollection of marrying this person. And eventually this husband changes and makes way for another husband. And as she goes through the cycle of spouses, her life is changing. And it's about her acknowledging what she really wants her life to be and some of the compromises that she would need to make in order to have some things a certain way. I really enjoyed the premise of this book. I didn't necessarily like how intimate some of the relationships got in a very short time, even though these people were legally married. But overall, I liked the book and would recommend it. The next book that I read was Yellowface by R.F. Kuang, which is about two young women writers, one who's very successful, the other who's not so much. And they're friends. They've been friends since university days. And it's about how they start to steal stories from each other to further their careers and some of the consequences that they face or don't because of it. The author makes some bold political statements in this one, and some of those things may be a little uncomfortable to read if you participate in the bookish community, which you do because you're watching this video. But like, there are places in here where she talks about booktubers and how people make videos for views, which, like, yeah, we make videos to share our opinions, but we make them on here because we want our opinions to be viewed by other people so that they can interact with us. I don't know how you feel about the politics of this book, but I enjoyed the text. I enjoyed the story by itself, just not so sure about the politics, but I liked it anyway. I read Inside Out and Back Again by Than Haley, which is a novel told in verse for a young audience. This was a Newbery Honor book, and it is about a 10-year-old girl who leaves Vietnam in 1975 and becomes a refugee in the United States. A little bit of the comparison of her life in Vietnam. While the country's fallen into communism and a lot of their men have been lost to the war, what are some of the things that this young girl still enjoyed about her home, and the comparison between her life and, of course, when she arrives in the United States. So definitely want to recommend this one. If you haven't already heard about it, pick it up. This is the other book by Anissa Gray. Life and Other Love Songs is a novel about a family where the man, when he was a boy, he and his mother and his brother escaped a domestic violence situation. And now that he is a man, a little bit about his family situation, the relationship between he and his wife. His wife wants to pursue this musical career and he's not necessarily for it, and then he disappears. And we're reading about the secrets that plague this family, how people refuse sometimes to tell people, even the people who they're closest to, refuse to share who they are with their loved ones, and how sometimes keeping those secrets can really erode relationships. Anissa Gray writes family sagas really well. This book is set in Detroit, and she gives us an experience of life in the 1980s and 90s. There's some queer representation in here, and because of the time period, we're getting a little bit of the prejudice that gay people experience in this time, some of the other like health challenges as well. The characters are not all likable, but they're all very sympathetic. Like, even when they make these terrible decisions, you could kind of justify what they do alongside these characters. So I really enjoyed this one as well. Very, very well written. I will definitely read more from this author, so I'll wait to see what she writes next. I finished Nothing to See Here by Kevin Wilson, which explores a relationship between two women. They meet as girls in a boarding school. One is going to the boarding school because her family is very wealthy. The other has been sent there on a scholarship. And even after that period of their life is over, they have maintained a pen pal kind of relationship. And now suddenly one of them is a political wife, and she sends for her friend to come to be a part of her family to help take care of some children. And it has a little bit of a magical realism element. So we're reading a little bit about what it requires to maintain an appearance of propriety in this political spotlight, and a little bit about the family dynamics and comparing biological family and found family, and I was eating up all of it. I also love the supernatural exploration that the author gives in here, and how sometimes what seems like magical realism is really a metaphor for, just regular things that are happening in your life, and I loved it. I read The Wonderful Wizard of Oz by L. Frank Baum. Is that how you pronounce his name? And his author's note says this is a modern fairy tale, and it did feel like it. It's pretty familiar with the story about Dorothy and her dog, who they're caught up in a cyclone, and so they leave their home in Kansas, and it's about her journey as she's trying to get back home and the people that she meets along the way, the people who become part of her friend group or her entourage, all trying to find this person, this magical person who can give them the thing that they desire most. And I love what the author has to say about the things that we desire and why we desire them, and what we would do if our dreams came true, or what we would give up in order for our dreams to come true. And I loved it. I loved it. So I was pretty familiar with the storyline, but I also like seeing how what I thought I knew was a little bit different when I was reading the text. So I enjoyed that. And the last book that I finished in the month was Brooklyn by Colm Toibin, which is about a young woman who we meet in Ireland in the years after World War II. She's educated. She has all the potential in the world, but because of the economy, she can't find a job. So she's offered an opportunity to come to the United States and help out her family back home. And it's about her taking that journey and the reader taking that journey along with her. What are some of the things that she will face as a young unmarried woman in this new world? If you've been watching my channel for some time, you know I love a good immigrant story. I've read a lot of them, but this one was just so much different. It's not often that I read about a young woman and her life in Ireland before she comes to the United States. So that was enough to make me really want to read this book, and I wasn't disappointed. The author recently published a follow-up to this story. There is a sequel now entitled Long Island, and I'm definitely adding that to my TBR to be read very soon. One of the things that I really love about Colm Toibin's writing is how rich his sentences are. This book is written in a present tense way, and it feels like the reader is taking this journey alongside our main character, and I love that. So yeah, these are the 16 books that I read in April. I loved all of them. I would recommend almost all of them to you. I'm still trying to hold up. These are 14 of them because I read 2 electronic versions. Based on the synopsis, there are books that you would probably be more interested in than others, but I wouldn't hesitate to recommend any of these to you because I had a fantastic reading month. So if you're going to pick up any of these based on something that I said today, I would love to hear about it. Thank you so much for watching. Would love to hear from you in the comments. Let me know what you've been reading and loving lately. So until we come back for another video, happy reading. Bye.